Hi, this is Anita with 5 Minutes with Art. Today we're going to talk a little bit about one of the most famous art movements around is Impressionism. And why is Impressionism such an important art movement? Well, first of all, let's talk about what is Impressionism. Impressionism is a style of painting that emerged in France in the 1860s and 1870s. It was defined by visible brushstrokes, light focus color, everyday subjects, outdoor settings, which is, plein air painting, it was called. So it wasn't realistic at all. It was more, type of artwork, which in some ways can almost be a little bit hazy. It could maybe, seem a little bit hazy with some of the brush strokes. Why was it revolutionary? Why was it such an important art movement? The reason is because during that time, the French Academy favored historical and mythological subjects. They want perfect, realistic techniques, dark, muted color palettes, and smooth and visible brushstrokes. So these artists that were painting Impressionism were really breaking away from what would even be sold during the day or what people would show during the day, which was, this realistic sort of dark, muted type of art. Impressionists, they rejected all of that. They believed in real life, not gods or heroes. They had loose, sort of sketchy strokes. They had bright, vibrant colors. They had outdoor scenes. And they had ordinary people doing ordinary things. And this type of art was actually very shocking during this time. A lot of the critiques said things about them like the Impressionist artists were lazy, they were amateur, and they were even disrespectful to the art and the art world itself. But the revolution wasn't just a style, it was an attitude. So the Impressionists then started to exhibit outside of the convention. They began to exhibit themselves. They took art to the streets and to the countryside. They documented modern life as it happened, and they made art for art's sake, not for institutions. In other words, they are people who broke the rules and started a movement that changed art forever. That is something that I really love about the Impressionism movement is these artists were doing art because they loved art. They weren't doing art because that's what sold. They were doing Impressionist art because that's what they loved and that's what they wanted to do. The core techniques of Impressionism is the use of light over details. They had visible brushstrokes. They wanted to see the brushstrokes, the strokes of the brush on the painting. They painted outdoors. And, this is one of the new things, to be able to take it outdoors and be able to paint it outdoors. And with that, became things like the invention of the easel, where they could bring it outdoors, and some of the tubes of paint that they could bring outdoors. So they'd bring it outdoors, and they'd look at light, and they'd look at nature, and they'd look at everyday life. They focused on everyday life and everyday people. They painted cafes, streets, gardens, and friends, ordinary moments. So some of the most famous Impressionist artists would be, of course, Claude Monet would be considered one of the most famous. Pierre-Auguste Renoir is another one. Edgar Degas is one. Bertha Morisot is another. These are some of the very famous artists, and they're the artists that changed art forever. You notice that, Bertha Morisot is a woman that's there. That there were several women that were well known, also Impressionist artists during this time frame. So I have written a blog post on this. If you'd be interested, we can put it into the description, entitled, "What is Impressionism and why was it revolutionary?" And on there's also some questions that we have, some frequently asked questions that we try to answer about Impressionism and why Impressionism art, was such an important art movement. One reason, why is Impressionism so popular today? And I think one of the reasons is because it feels alive and emotional and accessible. The colors are beautiful, the scenes are familiar, and the mood is uplifting. And I think that's one reason why many people today still resonate with Impressionist art. Just to clarify a few things, there is a difference between Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. And the reason I didn't list Vincent van Gogh is because Vincent van Gogh is considered a Post-Impressionist, not an Impressionist. Even though he knew the Impressionists and the Impressionism, his type of art was considered to be after Impressionism art, which is Post-Impressionism. We hope that you've enjoyed this podcast, that you'll join with us for a few minutes each week just to learn a little bit about art, because art is so much an important part of our world and the world in which we live. Thank you so much for being part of our community and joining with us. We hope that you'll subscribe if you have not yet, and be part of our community. Thank you.